Okay, good morning to you guys. Good morning to everyone online as well. Today is the first day of a 5-day course that I'm going to teach. It's called Foundation in the Path to Enlightenment. This is going to help you to be able to get all the foundational teachings that you need to be able to really get started on the path to enlightenment. There's plenty of things to be able to share with you over the next 5 days, but we're just going to start with meditation, just to give you guys a chance to practice a bit of the teachings of the Buddha through meditation. And then afterwards, I'm going to introduce you to the course, helping you to understand what it is that you're going to be learning. Then we're going to be talking about the life story of the Buddha, helping you to understand his life story. We're going to take a mid-morning break, and then when we come back, I'm going to teach you what is enlightenment, so you'll understand what this mental state is. Because if you're making your way towards a certain goal, the more you understand about what that is, you'll be able to more easily navigate your way to it, and you'll know that you've actually arrived once you've gotten there. Then we're going to take a lunch break, and when we come back, I'm going to teach Buddhist chanting, helping you to understand how to do the chanting and the history of that and where it comes from and the benefits of it and all those good things. So if you'd like to join for meditation, I'm going to start with chanting to ease us into the meditation. Then I'm going to come in with the guidance. Then there's going to be a period of time where it's just quiet, and then we're going to come out of that with some more chanting. And since you guys have already understood some of the things that I've taught about the chanting in other classes, I don't need to share all of those things, and about the seated position and all of that stuff. You guys already know those kinds of things. So if you like to chant along, you're more than welcome to. And then afterwards, I'll come back in with the guidance. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhaṃ Bhagavaṃ Abhivādayami Savakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Sāvaka Saṅkho Saṅghang Namami Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokavitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusrang Bhutto Bhagavati. Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath, a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose experiencing the full breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธมหาเขวาโอตังมาเขวันนังอภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตมหาเขวตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหาเขวโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมอะระหะสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมอะระหะสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมอะระหะสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมหาเขวาอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารณังสัมมุโนสกขาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสาธัมมาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังพุทโธภควาติ Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Once again, good morning to you guys. Welcome to everyone online as well. I'm going to get you guys started with understanding this course and what I'm going to be sharing with you over the next 5 days. This is going to help you to be able to understand how we've planned out the entire course and how to get the most benefits out of the course as you're progressing through day by day. So we start each day at 9 a.m. and we finish up around 3, sometimes earlier, sometimes a little bit later, just depends on what's going on in the class. But this is generally the time frame that we actually are teaching. This is my contact information if you guys would like to contact me for any reason. This is more so for after the class, because if you're coming to class, great, you'll be here, I'll be able to teach you. If you're not, then that's fine too. You don't need to let me know if you're not coming to class. But after class, in terms of, after the course is completely over, you're going to need help and guidance beyond the course. And this is a good way to be able to get that through email, or you can use any of the messaging apps, or all of this stuff is available on our website too. So you'll be able to access this from our website. In terms of how the course is structured, is each day, our plan is to start chanting and meditation at 9 a.m. You'll see that we'll do that each morning. And then we usually finish up around 9:30. This is where I then start moving into a discussion on the teachings. Some people call this a Dhamma talk. The word Dhamma means teachings. So it's a teachings talk, right? Or the way that I think about it is a discussion. It's not a lecture or a sermon or anything like that. It's more of me helping you to be able to understand the teachings of the Buddha. So we'll start at 9:30 with that. And then we usually take a mid-morning break around 10:30, 11, somewhere around there. Then after that, we come back and I teach another topic, and we go up to lunch around 12. Again, sometimes a little bit earlier, sometimes a little bit later. Then we come back from our lunch break after an hour and a half, and I'll let you guys know each time we're leaving for lunch what time we actually come back. And then I teach in the afternoon some topic typically associated with meditation, and then we actually are doing meditation in the afternoon as well. So then we finish up at 3. And again, give or take, sometimes earlier, sometimes a little bit later. All of this happens for 4 days. And then on the 5th day, I invite students out to a tour where I take them out to some other temples outside the city. There's a forest temple that I go to, and then there's a temple up on top of the mountain. These are 2 different branches of Buddhism within Thailand. And by visiting these 2 different temples on the same day, you can kind of see the differences and uniquenesses between these 2 different branches of Buddhist teachings in Thailand. So I'll give you guys more detail on this as we get closer and closer to it. But that's kind of Friday, where we go out and you can learn the artwork, the architecture, the symbolism of temples. So rather than just like, oh, that's pretty, or oh, that's interesting, you actually know what it is that you're looking at, because the teachings of the Buddha have been embedded into the artwork, the architecture, the symbolism. All of these things contain the teachings of the Buddha. And if you understand his teachings, you'll be able to visit a temple and glean information. It's almost like the temple walls will speak to you as you're going out and about and doing different journeys to various temples. So this is our plan for the 5 days. In terms of how the course is developed, it's developed based on this book, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. You can get this for free from our website. You can download it. You can take it and go print it. You can get printed versions here by just reimbursing for the printing cost, or you can get it on Amazon because it's available there as well. I'm going to be teaching chapters 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 19 as part of this course. So there's certain things that are in the course that aren't in the book, and there's certain things that are in the book that aren't in the course. So a combination of the two will help you to get fully informed about what the teachings of the Buddha are. And this is the type of book that you'll read probably multiple times. I've had some students tell me that they've read it 8, 12 different times, and they've learned something new every single time they're learning it or reading it. So this is something that you'll be able to revisit multiple times to be able to study and learn the teachings of the Buddha. In terms of the topics that I'm going to be teaching you as part of this course, we're going to start this morning with sharing the life story of Gotama Buddha, helping you to understand this individual that we refer to as the Buddha, what his life was about, kind of helping you to understand that. Then after our break, I'll share with you enlightenment. What is enlightenment? This mental state of enlightenment, because if you're going to navigate your way to it, you'd like to know what it's about and be able to more easily navigate your way to it and know that you've actually arrived once you've gotten to that mental state. So I'll explain to you the ins and outs of what enlightenment is. Then tomorrow, I'm going to be sharing the 4 Noble Truths, establishing right view. This is the very first teaching of the Buddha, where you learn the problem in the mind, the cause of that problem, the elimination of it, and the path forward. And then I'm going to completely teach the entire path from the beginning all the way toward the end. This is called the Eightfold Path. This is the path for all humans to enlightenment. You would need to know this teaching inside and out, backwards and forwards, in order to be able to make your way to enlightenment. So this is a teaching that people will oftentimes revisit multiple times in order to commit it to their memory. You might actually see students that have studied with me before coming back to be able to learn either here or online, because they like to revisit this topic many times to really get it solid in their mind. So I'm going to be teaching that tomorrow morning. That'll be the entire morning. Of course, we'll take a break in the middle, but this is going to take about 2.5 hours to teach this, because it's a core central teaching of the Buddha. Then on Wednesday morning, I'm going to be teaching what's called transforming the 3 poisons, craving, anger, and ignorance. This is a way to refer to the high-level pollutions that the Buddha discovered in the mind. Not only are we going to talk about these as problems and challenges that are in the mind, but we're going to talk about the solutions too, about how to uproot these out of the mind, because that's what's actually leading to enlightenment, by eliminating these pollutions out of the mind. Then after our break on Wednesday, we'll come back and I'll teach you the 5 precepts, a householder's guide to daily practice. If you've ever heard that the Buddha taught no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no lying, and no intoxicants, the Buddha actually didn't teach this. That sounds like rules and commandments. It sounds like black and white. So I'm going to be using the original words of the Buddha all throughout the course. And then here with the 5 precepts, I'm going to be sharing the original words of the Buddha so you can see what he actually taught. Because there's much more illuminating language that he shares. It's going to help you to fully be able to understand this particular teaching and then be able to practice it. Then on Thursday, I'm going to teach what is karma and how does it affect me. This is a natural law that is affecting each individual being, whether you're aware of it or not. And the more wisdom you have of this, you can actually navigate the world very peacefully. So this particular teaching is something that you're awakening to. When we talk about awakening, we mean cultivating wisdom. So you're going to need to cultivate wisdom about this natural law, which is cause and effect, or action and result. You're not believing this natural law. You're able to see the truth for yourself that it actually exists. And now as you cultivate wisdom on this, you'll be able to navigate the world peacefully and get to the point where you fully extinguish all your unwholesome karma. So I'm going to teach the 4 types of karma, and I'm going to teach you how to extinguish your unwholesome karma. Then I'm going to teach what is merit. This is essentially a unique type of wholesome karma that I'll teach you about. Then I'm going to explain how to receive continued support on the path to enlightenment, because you're not going to be able to get to enlightenment in 5 days. Nobody's ever been able to do that. It's not possible. So you're going to need support beyond this particular course. So I'll teach you how to do that. Then in terms of meditation, I'm going to be teaching you breathing mindfulness meditation. This is the primary form of training in terms of meditation that the Buddha used in order to make his way to enlightenment. There's plenty of other things you would need to know, but in terms of meditation, this is the primary form because it's addressing the primary problem that's causing the discontentedness, which is craving, desire, attachment. So on Tuesday afternoon, I'm going to be teaching you the ins and outs of that. And between now and then, you'll get a chance to practice meditation at least 3 times, this morning, this afternoon, tomorrow morning before we get to it, so that way you have some background before we actually get into it. And then you'll learn about the seated, lying, standing, and walking positions, because your body can't be in the same position all the time. So you're going to need these at different times. It's almost like a tool belt that you're assembling. Then you'll learn Buddhist chanting as well. This will help ease the mind into meditation and get more benefit out of it. Then I'm going to teach you towards the end of the course how to integrate the teachings into your day-to-day life, because it's wonderful learning in a course like this, but if you're not integrating the teachings into your day-to-day life, you're not going to see the benefits and the results. So I'm going to teach you how to do that as well. Okay, so any questions on what you're going to learn in the course? No? Okay. Let me see if we have anything online. Let's see. Good morning to everyone online. Okay, all right. I'm not seeing any questions there either. All right, so we'll move into this first topic of the life story of the Buddha. It's chapter 19 in the book. I shared just a little bit of details of the life story of the Buddha there. And I titled this chapter, The Difficult Human Existence, Sickness, Aging, and Death, because these are the things that help to motivate the Buddha to actually make his way to enlightenment, is he experienced observing sickness, aging, and death in the kingdom. You'll hear about that. So I'll explain to you guys what this is, but by the time you get to enlightenment, there is no difficulty. Life is at ease. You're completely peaceful and joyful. You can navigate the world harmoniously. There's no issues whatsoever. But in terms of the unenlightened state, the sickness, aging, and death seems very difficult for people in terms of your own sickness, aging, and death, and even the people around you that you're close to. So I'm going to explain to you what that is and how it motivated the Buddha in this life journey to enlightenment. So I'm organized this talk into these categories, where I'm going to be talking about the Buddha's birth, his early life, his journey to enlightenment, and then his teaching and kind of what he did throughout his life with teaching. And then we'll talk about and circle back to sickness, aging, and death and explain to you why people really struggle during this period of time. So essentially, this individual who we refer to as the Buddha, he was born Siddhartha Gotama. He was born into a royal family. His mom was the queen. His dad was a king. And during this period of time, if you were pregnant as a woman, they would take you back to your homeland in order to be able to give birth. So when she was getting close to delivering, they organized a caravan and they took her back to her homeland towards her parents and her siblings. These people would be there available as she delivers the baby to be able to help her to take care of the child. So as she's making her way back to her homeland, she goes into labor pains and they need to stop the caravan, and she gets out and goes over to a tree and she's holding onto the branch of a tree trying to deliver the baby, because the baby wouldn't come out through the normal birthing canal. She was having a lot of difficulties getting the baby out, so it ends up breaking through the side of her stomach. And because of this, she actually died 7 days later. And it wasn't uncommon for women to die during that time frame in childbirth. And sometimes even the child would die as well. Where today we would have just did a C-section and she would have been just fine. But 2,500 years ago, this technology didn't exist, so that's why she ends up dying. This baby, Siddhartha Gotama, was born in what we refer to as Nepal, modern day Nepal. Today, they have that line between India and Nepal, but during the lifetime of this period of time, 2,500 years ago, that didn't exist. So Siddhartha Gotama was born in 563 BC, and that's why this technology to do a C-section didn't exist during that time frame. So she ends up dying. There was protocols in place also that if you died during childbirth as a woman, and because it was so common, they had these protocols that if you had older siblings or younger siblings or any kind of brothers or sisters, they would end up adopting your child as their own. So if you died and your child lived, then the child would get adopted by your siblings. So Siddhartha Gautama's mother, the queen, had an older sister. So essentially his aunt became his stepmother and raised him as her own child throughout his life. And it's said at the time of his birth that he walked 7 steps. There was lotus flowers blossoming under his feet, and he spoke and he said, "This will be my last birth." I don't think this part of the story is actually true, because if this was true, the next part of the story wouldn't be needed, because the next part of the story is that his father, being interested to know what his son was going to become, summoned fortune tellers and advisors to come and let him know what his son was going to become. Well, if your child starts walking and lotus flowers are blossoming under their feet and they talk from birth, you don't need to know what this child's going to become. You can tell they're a very special child and what's going to occur. So sometimes what people do is they embellish a story as it goes through different hands. Over 2,500 years ago, the Buddha did amazing things. He did a wonderful thing, which is got to enlightenment and shared the teachings with others to be able to get to enlightenment. But sometimes people try to embellish the story in order to make him look even better than he already was. And we don't need to embellish the story of a Buddha because they've already done some amazing things. But nonetheless, this father, and now his stepmother, have these advisors come to advise them what their son was going to become. 108 advisors come, and out of those 108, 107 tell the king that his son's going to be a great monarch and a great ruler, and he's going to rule over his territory, and he's going to expand it far and wide. And of course, his father's like, all right, that's my boy. That's what he wanted to hear. Well, there was one advisor who came in at the end, and he apologized to the king, and he said, "Sir, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry to deliver this news to you. I heard the other advisors, and they're 100% accurate. Your son is going to be a great ruler, or I should say a great leader. He's going to be a great leader, but he's not going to be a ruler in the way that you think. He's not going to rule over your territory, and he's not going to expand your territory. He's going to be a spiritual leader." And his father didn't like that. So just in case this advisor was true and was able to see the future for this child, that he decided to sequester his son in the palace and not let him go outside, not allow him to get involved in worldly affairs. He thought if he went outside and got involved in worldly affairs, he'd be interested to be a spiritual leader. But instead, he kept him in the palace, and he kind of lavished him with this life of luxury. He ended up giving him, wonderful fabrics, wonderful entertainment and food, beautiful women bathing him and taking care of him. Everything you can imagine royal riches could buy, this father provided that for his son. And this is the way he lived life in the royal palace, his entire life, up to the age of 29. And the way that this time frame worked is if you were going to become a king, you would become the king at the age of 30. And your father would retire, and now they would be there to help you to be able to learn how to become a better and better king. So at the age of 29, Siddhartha Gautama realized he was about to become the king, and he had never been outside the palace. And he was thinking, how can I rule over these people and rule over this kingdom if I've never even been outside the palace? I haven't even been into the kingdom. How could I be any kind of effective ruler? So Siddhartha Gautama decides, against his father's wishes and without his knowledge knowledge, he decides to go outside into the kingdom to kind of see what's going on so that he could ultimately be a better and better king. So at the age of 29, he goes outside the palace and he takes with him his royal attendant. This is like his chief of staff, his main confidant, so to speak. And he goes outside the palace and he sees what's called the 4 observations. He sees a sickly person, an aging person, a dead corpse, and he sees a roaming ascetic, someone who's kind of given up worldly life in order to seek a better understanding of life. And when he has these 4 observations, it's very impactful to him. And he needs to ask his royal attendant, like, what's going on? Because he doesn't understand what's happening. He's living this life of luxury, so he doesn't understand this life in the palace, in the kingdom. So he sees this sickly person and they're really struggling and having difficulties, and there's all this disgruntledness around this person. And he has to turn to his royal attendant and say, what's going on over there? And he's like, oh, that person's sick and they're not able to get the basic necessities to sustain life very easily. So they're very disgruntled and frustrated. And Siddhartha Gotama, this is very impactful to his mind because he's living this life of luxury. And if you've lived your life this way for 29 years and that's all you've ever known, you'd probably think everybody lives that way, right? So when he saw this person struggling to get basic necessities to sustain life, he was really impacted by this. And then he ultimately sees a aging person, and same thing. And this person is really struggling and they're getting old and decrepit. And this person is also struggling to get basic necessities to sustain life. And his royal attendant informs of this. And this is also very impactful for him because he hadn't seen this before. And then he sees a dead corpse and the family's grieving around this dead corpse. And once again, he turns to his royal family, like, what's going on over there? And he's like, oh, this person was someone that's really going to help them to be able to provide the basic necessities to sustain life. And now this person's dead. They're not going to have that ability. And again, this was very impactful to Siddhartha Gotama, who's living this life of luxury. Then he sees this roaming ascetic, someone who's basically given up worldly life and is trying to understand life better. And Siddhartha Gotama needs to ask his royal attendant, like, what's going on over there? What's that guy doing? And he's like, oh, that guy's trying to figure out all this stuff and why sickness, aging, and death is such a big problem for people. And Siddhartha Gotama decides that that's what he would like to do, that he's not interested in being a ruler or a king, because the way he looked at it is that the kingdom was full of misery and despair. And he wasn't interested in ruling over misery and despair. He was interested in helping people escape out of that. And being the ruler of this wouldn't allow him to be able to do that. So he decides that he's going to leave the royal palace and go on this journey to try to figure out the sickness, aging, and death and why people experience such difficulties and struggles during this period of time. So he goes back to the royal palace, and at the time he was married and he had a young infant son, and they were sleeping because it was nighttime. And he comes back to the palace, and when he comes back, he decides he's going to leave in the middle of the night because he didn't understand his mind as much as he did by the time he got to enlightenment, but he understood it enough that he felt like if he woke up his wife and his son and tried to say goodbye, that he wouldn't be able to leave, hugging them and kissing them and saying goodbye. He felt like it would be too strong, that he wouldn't be able to leave. So he ends up leaving without them knowing. And he takes with him his favorite horse, and he takes with him his royal attendant, and they end up leaving out of the palace. And then eventually he gets to the point where he lets his horse go, he lets his royal attendant go, and he cuts off his hair. At this particular time, if you were a member of the royal family, you would grow this really long, beautiful hair. This is how people knew that you were a member of the royal family, because nowadays, if we have a king or a queen, we just take their picture and put it all over the kingdom, and then everybody knows who the king and the queen are. But during that time frame, they didn't have that technology, so the royal family would grow their hair very long, because it was only the royal family that could take care of this long, beautiful, flowing hair. Those people that worked in the fields and did labor jobs, they wouldn't be able to have that long, beautiful hair because it would get all tangled up and knotted and things like this. So the royal family had servants that could comb their hair, shampoo their hair, detangle their hair, and keep it really nice. And they had the time to sit around and do that. So if you went out into the kingdom with this long, beautiful, flowing hair, people knew you were a member of the royal family. So by Siddhartha Gotama cutting off this hair that he'd been growing for 29 years, it's like, I'm never going back again. right? No one would ever think that he was the king if he didn't have this long, beautiful, flowing hair. So he cut off his hair, and then he ends up taking up training with two individual teachers. First, he studies with his first teacher, and this person is teaching him for about 1 year. He's teaching him to hang himself upside down from trees, to lay on beds of nails, to pierce his body with metal implements, to starve himself. And the thought was that if you could cause physical pain to this body and your mind could overcome that pain, then you would get to enlightenment, because this person was claiming that they had gotten to enlightenment. So Siddhartha Gotama was trying to do that with this individual. And after 1 year of training this way, this particular teacher declared that Siddhartha Gotama had basically mastered his teachings and that he could now share his teachings. And Siddhartha Gotama realized that his mind wasn't any more peaceful than it was when he was in the royal palace. So he ends up leaving from this teacher and going to study with another teacher. And the second teacher essentially teaches him the same things: hanging himself upside down from trees, laying on beds of nails, piercing his body with metal implements, starving himself. And then again, after a year, he was declared a master of this person's teachings. And his mind wasn't any more peaceful than it was when he was in the palace. So he knew that he hadn't gotten to enlightenment. So he's frustrated with this whole thing, feeling like he had wasted 2 years of his life. And he decides to go off on his own. And he goes off and he goes to the forest and he tries to train his mind himself. But the only things he knows how to do are the things that the teachers had taught him. So he continues to do those kinds of things, taking it so far that he was only eating 1 grain of rice per day, right? So he is doing this for an extended period of time. He's on the edge of the forest meditating, basically skin and bones, because he takes this so far that he's basically on death's doorstep. And there's this mother and young daughter who come by and they offer him some rice, and they beg and they plead with him to eat some rice. And he reluctantly accepts this rice, and he starts to eat this rice. And he has a realization in this moment. He realizes that when he's in the palace, he was living this life of luxury. He had everything and anything you could imagine. But when he left, he swung all the way to the other side, where he's eating 1 grain of rice per day. And he realizes that neither of these two extremes lead to enlightenment. It's only the middle way. So he starts to develop this understanding of what's called the middle way, where you basically do things in moderation and gradually make your way towards training your mind in this middle way. And the Eightfold Path is ultimately what he describes to be the middle way, is training your mind with this Eightfold Path. So over the next 4 years, a total of 6 years, he trains his mind and he gets to enlightenment. And he knows that his mind is enlightened because his mind's completely peaceful and joyful. There's no discontent feelings. There's no anger, no frustration or irritation or any of those other discontent feelings. But he was interested to share his teachings with others and help people to understand what he had discovered. But he knew that his teachings were so different than what everybody else was teaching at the time, because they were hanging themselves upside down from trees and starving themselves and laying on beds of nails. And he knew that none of that stuff actually led to enlightenment. So he hangs out at this tree. And nowadays, this is Northeast India, but at that time, it wasn't, just determined to be that. There wasn't that line there. But in Northeast India, there's this tree that he hung out for 7 weeks, contemplating whether or not he should share his teachings. Well, ultimately, he decides that he's going to share his teachings. And he starts to make his way back to the area where he was originally studying with those first 2 teachers. And as he makes his way back to that area, he encounters 4 of his previous classmates and 1 of his previous teachers. And when he encounters these people, they start laughing at him and joking him and mocking him. But by this time, when you get to enlightenment, your mind's not affected by that, by people joking and mocking you. These people were joking and mocking him because they thought he had given up on the path to enlightenment. Because when they saw him coming, he had meat on his bones. He looked bright and vibrant and cheerful and radiant. To them, in order to get to enlightenment, you needed to be disparaging the physical body. So when they saw this person looked healthy and had meat on his bones and he was cheerful and bright, they thought he had given up on the path to enlightenment. But he knew that he was enlightened. His mind mind was completely peaceful. They were mocking him and joking him and laughing at him. So he just comes over to where they're at. He sits down on the ground and he takes his hand and he touches the earth. And he performs the one and only miracle that he ever performed, which when he touched the earth, these animals came to where he was at. So there's like deer and rabbits and squirrels and birds and all these things that are coming to where he's at. And these 5 people see this and they were like, okay, you have our attention. And they sit down and like, what do you have to say? And he delivers his very first teaching, the 4 Noble Truths. And in 4 simple statements, he was able to help them understand the problem, the cause of the problem, the elimination of it, and the path forward. And the way that the teachings of the Buddha work is that they're independently verifiable. They're not based in any belief. So by sharing those 4 statements, those individuals could see that he had indeed figured out how to get to enlightenment, because he wouldn't understand that information and it wouldn't be independently verifiable if he hadn't truly figured it out and how to get to enlightenment. So they knew that he was enlightened and they become his first 5 students. This is the one and only miracle that he ever performs, because a Buddha isn't trying to convince people who they are. They're not going out into the world and trying to convince people that they're an actual Buddha, because one of the powers and strengths of a Buddha is that people don't know that he's a Buddha. And now when he observes their mind, he's able to know that this person has certain pollutions and then help them with teachings to be able to go beyond that. Whereas if everybody knew that this person was a Buddha, then he wouldn't be able to use that ability to be able to help people to get to enlightenment. So during his teaching career, his students just kept growing and growing and growing. There are times where, teachers that were claiming that they were enlightened would come to see the Buddha and they would talk to him, and they would oftentimes bring their students with them. And as they were talking with the Buddha, they would sometimes get so angry and frustrated, they would storm out of the meeting. And the students of that teacher would know that their teacher wasn't enlightened, and then those students would become the students of the Buddha. Or sometimes that particular teacher discussing the teachings with the Buddha so closely, and the Buddha was able to explain to them what the teachings are, they would then know, oh my goodness, this person's enlightened, and they would become a student of the Buddha and bring with them their students. So his students just kept growing and growing and growing. And countless people during his lifetime got to enlightenment. He taught from the age of 35 until the age of 80. So for 45 years, he dedicated his life to sharing his teachings with others. He did end up ultimately coming back to the area where his family was. His son, his wife, his brother-in-law, cousins, his mother, his stepmother came to learn with him, and they ordained. All of these people were getting to enlightenment. Just countless people were getting to enlightenment during his lifetime. And then he dies at the age of 80 from old age. That essentially his body gives out, and he ends up dying from that. So this is his teaching career, and this is, what he did is shared what it took for him to get to this enlightened mental state. He wasn't trying to convince anybody of anything or force anybody to do anything. He was just explaining what led to his mental state so that everybody else that was interested in learning how to achieve that same mental state would have the ability to do that. Eventually, he explains why we experience this sickness, aging, and death, and why we keep experiencing the struggles because of sickness, aging, and death. What he discovers is that the unenlightened mind craves permanence, that when an individual is sick and ill, they're disgruntled because they're craving permanent health. And this body is not permanent, and it can't be permanently healthy. Or nowadays, like if we're sick, maybe someone stays inside and they really want to go outside and see their friends. And now they're craving that particular thing. And now they're struggling at home, just being at home by themselves. Or if someone's aging, and they're noticing wrinkles or gray hair, or their body isn't as able to navigate the world as easily as when they were a child. They could be disgruntled because they're craving permanent youthfulness. Or when we get close to death, if the mind is craving permanent life, then when it's getting close to death, it'll really struggle with that. Or the people around you, when they're dying, if you're craving for them to be in your life permanently, the mind will struggle during that period of time because none of these things are permanent. So the Buddha ultimately figures out that it's a craving for permanence that causes the mind to have that disgruntledness during these periods of time. But then the thing that's causing all of this is birth. that because of birth, you're going to experience sickness, aging, and death. If there's no birth, then there's no sickness, aging, and death. So by getting to enlightenment, not only do you get to the peace and joy that is the enlightened mental state, but you'll get to the point where you're not experiencing the continuous rebirth over and over and over again, so that you'll keep experiencing sickness, aging, and death over and over and over again. Okay, so this is essentially a summary of the life story of the Buddha. Do you have any questions? Anything you'd like to ask? No? Okay. Let me see if we have anything online here. Okay. I don't see any questions online. All right. So it's 10 o'clock. Usually we take our first break at 10:30. But if you like, I can just keep going and share the next topic with you. And we might actually have a pretty early lunch. And, we can maybe even shorten up the day if you'd like, since there's not that many people in the class. Would you like to just keep going? Yeah? Okay. All right. So let me share this next topic with you about enlightenment. What is enlightenment? This is a mental state that an individual can experience in this life. And I'm going to share with you the ins and outs of what enlightenment is. And it's important to understand that it's a real challenge for the unenlightened mind to understand what enlightenment is. It's kind of like if I sat here and I explained to you what chocolate ice cream tastes like, and you've never actually tasted chocolate ice cream. I could explain it to you all day long, and you'll have a better understanding of what chocolate ice cream is and what it tastes like after our conversation, but you're not going to know fully what chocolate ice cream tastes like until you actually taste it. So I can explain to you all the ins and outs of what enlightenment is, but you're not going to fully understand it at the end of our conversation until you actually are experiencing it. The qualities of enlightenment slowly and gradually start to increase as you're purifying the mind and getting closer and closer to enlightenment. So people will understand what enlightenment is as they're making their journey to enlightenment. But here at the beginning of your journey, I can explain to you what enlightenment is, because then you can more easily navigate your way to it. Whereas if you didn't know what enlightenment was, you wouldn't actually be able to navigate your way to it. It's kind of like if I said to you, hey, would you like to go to Chiang Rai? The first thing you'd say is, well, what is Chiang Rai? And I'd be like, oh, it's the city to the north. It's about 3 hours through the mountains. And when you get there, you're going to see this and that and this and that. And you're like, oh, okay, I think I'd like to go. And now you'll be able to more easily navigate your way to it. And then once you get there, you'll know, this is Chiang Rai, because there's that thing that David was talking about. It's the same thing with enlightenment, is that by understanding what it is, you'll be able to more easily navigate your way to it. And once your mind is enlightened, you'll know that your mind is enlightened. But just understand, by the end of this conversation, you're not going to know 100% of what enlightenment is, but you'll definitely know more about it. It's the ultimate goal of the teachings of the Buddha. This is what he's guiding students to be able to obtain, is this mental state of enlightenment. So what enlightenment is it's a mental state that is attainable during this life or at death, where the mind's completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. The mind is unshakable. It's steady. It's calm. The mind is relaxed and calm, but yet attentive and alert. Because sometimes when we think about relaxed and calm, we think like, just kind of like lay back and kind of dull and lethargic. But that's not what the enlightened mind is. The mind is relaxed and calm. It's at ease, but it's attentive. It's sharp. It's crisp. Because you've eradicated pollutions of the mind. That's how you actually get to enlightenment, is through purification of the mind, training it to eradicate certain pollutions. So the mind's going to be bright and cheerful and uplifted. It's going to be radiant. And this is a permanent mental state that the mind can be experiencing at all times during your day. You wake up in the morning completely happy and joyful all day long. The mind's happy and joyful, and then as you go to sleep, the mind's still happy and joyful. It's called unconditioned happiness or unconditioned joy, where there doesn't need to be any condition met in order for you to experience those mental qualities of peace, calm, serenity, and contentedness with joy. So this is something that you can attain during this life or at death. It's possible to experience this mental state here in the human realm, and then also in the heavenly realm as well. Now, I realize that this idea, this understanding, these teachings of the 5 realms isn't something that would be wise for somebody to approach at the very beginning of their teachings in their journey to enlightenment. But just understand that you can attain enlightenment in the human realm or the heavenly realm as well. And all the teachings of the Buddha are independently verifiable. But right now isn't the time to really talk about the cycle of rebirth. But as you're learning about what is enlightenment, there's this understanding of the cycle of rebirth, that there's a connection here, that the Buddha taught 5 realms. He taught the hell realm, the animal realm, the afflicted spirits, which are like ghosts. Then there's the human realm and the heavenly realm. And you can get to a point where you independently verify these 5 realms, but that's not something you normally do right up front. So you can't get to enlightenment in the hell realm, the animal realm, or the afflicted spirit realm, but those realms aren't permanent. Those beings will be reborn and have an opportunity, or they may have already had an opportunity in the human realm and in the heavenly realm to make their way to enlightenment. So it's only in the human realm, in the heavenly realm, that one can get to enlightenment. And these aren't permanent existences. Beings are moving in and out of these different realms at different times. And the human realm is actually the ideal realm, because in this realm, we actually are capable of getting to enlightenment. And we tend to have built-in motivation because we experience pleasant feelings, painful feelings, and neither painful nor pleasant feelings. And those painful feelings and the neither painful nor pleasant tend to be built-in motivation for us to make our way to enlightenment. Where in the heavenly realm, they only experience pleasant feelings. So they don't have that built-in motivation. So beings can be very complacent in their journey to enlightenment, even here in the human realm. But because human beings don't like those painful feelings and the neither painful nor pleasant, we tend to be more interested to get to enlightenment. But even still, in the human state, there's an enormous amount of complacency that people have oftentimes in making their way to enlightenment. So enlightenment is a mental state that is attained through freeing the mind of craving, anger, and ignorance. These are called the 3 poisons, or the 3 unwholesome roots, or the 3 fires. We're going to be talking about this on Wednesday morning. This is a high-level way to describe the pollutions that the Buddha discovered in the mind. The most detailed description is the 10 fetters, which I'm going to introduce you to here in a moment, that you can learn about the 10 fetters. But when we talk about it from a high level, we talk about it as craving, anger, and ignorance. You're going to learn more about this on Wednesday morning. Then, in terms of the path to enlightenment, this is a purification of the mind through training of the mind, where you're eliminating the conditions that are keeping the mind in the unenlightened state. The conditions that are keeping the mind in the unenlightened state are these pollutions. So you're working to uproot these pollutions out of the mind. Some people refer to enlightenment as happiness or ultimate bliss, and I tend to not refer to it that way, because you understand happiness, you experience happiness, you have conditional happiness. Like maybe if it's sunny outside, someone might get really happy. Or if you get a raise at work, maybe your boss walks in and says, "Hey, I'm going to give you $20,000 a year more." Whoa, you might get really happy based on that condition. That's conditional happiness. What an enlightened being is experiencing is unconditioned happiness, where there doesn't need to be any condition met in order to be happy. In the unenlightened state, it's like if my mom and dad do this, if my brothers and sisters do this, if the weather is this, if my boss does this, if I have this type of house and this type of car, if my bank account has this balance, then I will be happy. So this is called conditional happiness, that all these conditions need to be met in order for the mind to be happy. And that means your happiness shrinks and shrinks and shrinks, because the more conditions that you have in your mind, they can't be met permanently. They can't be true all the time. So your ability to be happy actually shrinks. So people understand conditional happiness. The unconditioned happiness is where there's no condition that needs to be met in order to be happy. You can wake up in the morning and be happy all day long without any condition needing to be met. But it's not this jumping and bouncing off the walls, excited happiness that the mind experiences in the unenlightened state. It's this brightness, this cheerfulness, this uplifted mind that is just always happy and cheerful. So the enlightened mind is beyond this pleasure and pain. It's beyond these conditional experiences, where it can maintain its peace and joy permanently. So people oftentimes that are in what's called the jhanas. These are preliminary phases that the mind goes through before it gets to the first stage of enlightenment, where you're experiencing enhanced qualities of mind. When you experience those jhanas, it's like night and day. From when you were off the path to enlightenment until you're in these jhanas, it's like, whoa, you had no idea your mind was even capable of experiencing those enhanced qualities. And oftentimes people think they're enlightened when they're in the jhanas, but the mind's not enlightened yet. There's still plenty of room to grow beyond that. But because people are experiencing these enhanced qualities of mind, and it is so impactful to one's life, they oftentimes think that they're enlightened. And now they're going to describe whatever they're experiencing as enlightenment. So this is where you'll hear people call enlightenment as ultimate bliss. Or sometimes you will hear people say that enlightened beings still experience anger and frustration or agitation or annoyment, sadness and sorrow and things like this. That's because they're in the jhanas thinking that they're enlightened, and they're describing what they're experiencing as enlightenment. But I can assure you, an enlightened being doesn't experience any of those discontent feelings, but people are thinking that they're enlightened and they're describing it that way. So an enlightened being is beyond all of that. But if you're in the jhanas thinking you're enlightened, still experiencing those feelings, you'll describe enlightenment as someone who still experiences those things. So an enlightened being is experiencing plenty of happiness, plenty of joy, but it's unconditioned. There doesn't need to be any condition met in order for one to experience that. Let's talk about the advantages of enlightenment. Again, enlightenment is where the mind's completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. There's a high degree of focus, concentration, memory, and clarity of mind because the mind has eradicated its pollutions, that the mind can now perform optimally. You'll notice that the enlightened mind isn't experiencing any of these feelings any longer. There's no sadness, anger, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. All of this has been eliminated because you've uprooted the causes and conditions that are producing it. The pollutions of mind. When you get those out of the mind, it's physically impossible for an enlightened being to experience any of these feelings. Even if they tried to experience anger, they wouldn't be able to. So the mind has been completely purified and is no longer experiencing these things. The mind in the enlightened mental state will have deep wisdom about the world around you that other people don't have. You'll see people that are struggling with countless things that are just trivial to an enlightened being. It's so easy and so obvious of what's going on here, but for an unenlightened being, they will really struggle with those things. So you'll have this deep wisdom about the world around you. And this is where you really got to keep your ego in check and get rid of your ego, because the ego can arise and there can be some conceit here when you see people struggling with all these trivial things, but your mind has this wisdom to understand that this is just very simple and very straightforward. You'll notice that in the enlightened mental state, you'll be able to be polite, kind, friendly, and respectful to all beings. In the unenlightened state, it's quite challenging to do that because your mind has certain pollutions. So an individual will typically attribute their painful feelings to something external, and now they will be impolite, unkind, unfriendly, and disrespectful to that person, almost feeling justified in their moral conduct, not realizing that that is actually coming from their own mind. So right now, you might find it to be a struggle to be polite, kind, friendly, and respectful in all situations. But by the time you get to enlightenment, your mind will be able to do that effortlessly and easily. Your mind isn't going to be causing any harm to other beings in the world. You can't cause other people to be discontent, but you can cause them harm. Causing someone harm would be to cause harm to their material possessions, their physical body, their reputation. Whenever you're causing harm, harm will come back to you. So by the time you get to enlightenment, you're completely wise of the natural law of karma, and you're no longer causing harm to others, so therefore harm isn't coming back to you. You'll notice that because of this, you're actually experiencing very harmonious relationships, both personally and professionally. All your relationships will be harmonious, where they're at ease, because you're not being bitter and harsh and hostile to other people. So that's not coming back to you any longer, that you've done this for an extended period of time where you've been training your mind, and now all your relationships are at ease. They'll be really blossoming. You'll get to a point in the enlightened mental state where you're not even in a bad mood anymore. It's physically impossible to experience a bad mood by the time you get to enlightenment, because the causes and conditions that are producing it have been uprooted out of the mind. And now the mind's completely joyful, cheerful, bright, uplifted. There's gladness in the mind at all times. Okay, so these are the advantages of getting to enlightenment. The way that you get to enlightenment is you need to be able to learn and practice the core central teachings. And I'm going to be sharing essentially all of these teachings in this particular course. The 3 universal truths, the 4 noble truths, the Eightfold Path, the 5 precepts. We're going to be learning these in this course in detail. Then I'm going to expose you to the Brahma Viharas. I'm not going to really say that that's what it is, because there's other programs that I teach the Brahma Viharas. Essentially what these are is it's 4 healthy mental states that's going to transform certain aspects of your mind. So you'll kind of have exposure to these, but I'm not going to teach it until you see other programs. In this book, chapter 14, I have the Brahma Viharas, these 4 healthy mental states. So you'll be able to learn what those are and the symptoms of how to remedy these in the mind, because the Buddha oftentimes gets the reputation of being like a doctor, where there's a certain symptom in the mind and then there's a certain prescription that he suggests, right? So you're your own best doctor, right? If you know what the symptoms are and you know what the prescription is, all you need to do is apply it and you can get rid of these symptoms. So these 4 healthy mental states, or they're referred to as the Brahma Viharas, this is what's going to help you to be able to do that. Then I'm going to introduce you here in a moment to the 10 fetters. Then there's the 7 factors of enlightenment and extensive meditation training. These are the core central teachings that you would need to learn, and you would like to learn them with the original words of the Buddha, because there's plenty of resources out there in the world where people are sharing what they're referring to as the teachings of the Buddha, but oftentimes they're misleading and they're not actually based in the original words of the Buddha. So that's why I give away this book series for free, so that you can see what were his original words. What is it that actually leads to enlightenment? Because if you study his original teachings, you'll know what did he teach and what he didn't teach. So I'm going to be sharing these teachings as part of this course. These are the core central teachings to get started, but there's also teachings beyond this that an individual would need to know in order to get to enlightenment. This is just how to get started of really making your way to enlightenment. And when you're learning teachings from the Buddha, it's important that you don't believe any of his teachings. You're not believing a bunch of things and then hoping something good happens when you die. Instead, you're learning, examining, and investigating his teachings. Not believing, but investigating them. You're then reflecting on his teachings to independently verify whether they're true or they're false. And then you're practicing his teachings, integrating them into your day-to-day life to be able to fully transform the mind. It's through your practice of the teachings that the real transformation is occurring. This isn't just an intellectual pursuit. If somebody understood the teachings intellectually, but they weren't actually practicing the teachings, they're not anywhere close to enlightenment. It's the actual practice of the teachings that is going to transform your mind. But there needs to be a certain amount of intellectual learning to be able to bring the teachings into the mind. That's the investigation and examination. Then you reflect to independently verify whether these teachings could be true or false. And then you practice. And as you're practicing, that's where you really see the drastic improvement to the condition of your mind and your life. Because you know, in situations where you once used to get angry and frustrated and bitter and hostile, and when you're training your mind and you see that your mind's no longer doing that, you'll know it's these teachings that led to that. So you're never interested in believing anything. Never believe anything that I write in these books, anything that I talk about in the classes. You're always interested in seeing the truth for yourself, because that's what's going to allow you to get to wisdom. And it's the cultivation of wisdom that's going to transform your mind. So this is the way that you would attain enlightenment. Any questions here? No? Okay. For those of you guys online, you can ask questions by putting that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom in the comment section, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is introduce you to the 10 fetters. This is kind of like the underlying thing that the Buddha is guiding you to eliminate out of the mind. These are the 10 individual pollutions that he discovered, and then he provides the tools and techniques of how to uproot these out of the mind. And when you uproot these out of the mind, that's when you're experiencing enlightenment, and you're gradually bringing down these pollutions. And as you do, your qualities of mind are gradually increasing. So one of the ways to think about it is, yes, that you're attaining enlightenment. That's one way that we talk about it. But another way to talk about it is that your mind's already enlightened and you just have these pollutions in the way and you've got to get them out of the way. And when you get them out of the way, you'll experience the more and more qualities of enlightenment. The way you might think about it is like there's the sun, and then there's the clouds in front of the sun. And as you peel away the clouds, the rays of the sun start shining through more and more. And that's what you'll experience, is the qualities of enlightenment will start to increase gradually as you're peeling away the pollutions of the mind. So we refer to these as 10 fetters or 10 pollutions or taints or defilements. And they're referred to as a fetter because during the lifetime of the Buddha, they would attach a fetter to your ankle in order to keep you confined to a certain area. This was for like a prisoner or a criminal. So a fetter is a shackle and a chain and a ball. And they would just keep this person in a field. And this is how they would stay confined to a certain area. Where today we put prisoners in jail cells or prison cells, where during the lifetime of the Buddha, they would attach a fetter around your ankle, and this would keep them confined to that area. So when the Buddha discovers these pollutions, he calls them fetters because it's keeping the mind trapped in this unenlightened state, continuing to experience the difficulties and struggles of life over and over and over and over again. And it's when you uproot these fetters, or you get rid of these fetters, that the mind is then free. It's liberated, it's peaceful, and it's joyful. Just like that prisoner, if you got rid of this fetter off their ankle, it's like, whoa, I'm free. I can go about the world and do things however I would like to do them, right? So it's the same thing, that when you uproot these pollutions, the mind's now free. It's no longer bound up, experiencing the anger and the sadness and frustration and all these other things. So as part of your journey, you would need to know these inside and out. You need to get to the point where you understand what it is, what the symptoms are, how to eliminate them, and how to know to eliminate them. But at the beginning of your journey, you're just putting together these foundational teachings that I'm going to share with you in this program. But it's helpful to have an introduction to these just so you kind of generally know what they are, and then just understand everything that the Buddha taught in one way or another is helping you to be able to eliminate these. So I'm just going to introduce you to them, but other programs that I have will help you to be able to know what these are inside and out. So this first one is personal existence view. We talked about this on Saturday with your introduction to the teachings of the Buddha course. So I think you probably already have familiarity with that one, but there's some people online that are joining us that maybe you guys didn't learn this. What this is this is where the mind has a misunderstanding, or it has confusion. It has this perception or this misperception that this body is you or this mind is you. The mind clings to the self-image and the self-identity, wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way. And now when you go outside and you're being perceived that way, you feel happy and excited. But when you're not being perceived the way you want to be perceived, you'll experience painful feelings like frustration or agitation or annoyance or some other discontent feeling. So for example, if you've ever been in a social situation and you spilt something on your clothing and you were embarrassed, this is your personal existence view. The mind's clinging to this body, wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way, and you can only be happy when you're being perceived that way. So when you've got this spaghetti sauce all over your clothing, you're not being perceived the way you want to be perceived. So now the mind's frustrated or agitated or annoyed or embarrassed or some other discontent feeling. Or if you've ever looked in the mirror and you saw a wrinkle or a mole or a pimple or a gray hair, or you started losing your hair, if you were shaken up by that, this was your personal existence view, where your mind wasn't being perceived in the way that it wants to be perceived. The mind thinks that this body is you, and now when you go out in the world and you have this big pimple on your nose, you're embarrassed by that, or you're frustrated, or feel like less of a person. This is because the mind's clinging to this self-image, wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way. Or maybe you stood in front of your closet and thinking about who are you going to see today and how do you want to appear to others? And maybe you put on a certain set of clothing and looked in the mirror and you're like, no, that's not how I want to look today. I don't feel comfortable going out looking like this. And now maybe you put on another set of clothing, right? And now you looked in the mirror and you're like, no, that's not how I want to look. And then you put on a third set and you're like, okay, perfect. This is how I want to look. Now you feel comfortable going outside because you feel like you're going to be perceived the way you want to be perceived. Or I oftentimes tell people the story about when I was a child. As a teenager, I would stand in front of the mirror before going to school and I would get all the gel and the mousse and I would run it through my hair, trying to get every little hair in exactly the right spot. And then once I did, I would feel comfortable going to school. And sometimes I stood in front of the mirror so long trying to get every little hair in the right spot, I would actually miss the school bus on the way to school because I was, so involved in trying to look a certain way and not feeling comfortable to go outside until my hair looked a certain way. Right? So you might be having these same similar experiences in your day-to-day life. This is the mind's personal existence view, clinging to this self-image, wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way, and only feeling comfortable when that's the case. But the thing is that this body is not permanent. You can't be perceived that way permanently. I couldn't get that hair to be in exactly the same spot every day. It just wouldn't work because of impermanence, right? So as long as your mind's clinging to this body, craving permanence, you'll go outside in the world and experience discontentedness. Then there's the self-identity. This is where the mind can cling to your culture, your ethnicity, your sexual orientation, your nationality, your job or occupation, thinking that this is who you are. It can cling to any number of things. The mind will think that this is who you are. And now, again, if that's intact, you'll feel comfortable. But if not, you won't feel comfortable. So for example, if you've ever been in a relationship where your mind thought, I am a boyfriend, I am a girlfriend. And now when you guys were together, there was a certain amount of comfort. But when you guys broke up and now you're single, the mind doesn't identify that way. It doesn't identify with I am single, right? So now the mind might have thought the way to solve this problem with this uncomfortableness in the mind is to hurry up and get right back into another relationship, right? Because the mind doesn't understand this personal existence view, that that's the real problem, that the mind has adopted this identity of who you think you are as a person, and now you can only feel comfortable when that's intact. Or say, for example, your mind might think, I am American, or I am French, or I am Chinese, or I am German, or any of this I am, right? If you cling to this identity, now let's just say you're at a restaurant and 2 tables over, they're talking very fondly of people from the country that you're from. Oh, you'll feel happy. They're so excited. They're talking about me. All Americans are lovely and kind and warm and gentle. Wow, I feel so great. But now maybe 2 tables over, they're saying something degrading and disparaging about the country that you come from. And now you're frustrated and agitated or annoyed because you think they're talking about you. Or say that you have a certain job or occupation. Maybe I am a police officer, right? And now, as long as you're doing that job, you feel great, you feel wonderful because I am a police officer. But then let's just say you retire, or you get injured, or you get fired, and now you can't do that job anymore. And now after 10 or 20 years of doing this job, you're now driving a taxi, right? Or some other job. And your mind thinks, I am a police officer. And now you're frustrated and annoyed and uncomfortable because your mind's clinging to this identity of who you think you are as a person. And now you can't feel comfortable. You feel like less of a person. You don't feel whole any longer, right? These are the kind of things that you can have related to the self-identity. And there's any number of things that the mind can cling to as who you think you are. Even I am a Buddhist teacher. I am a Buddhist, right? The Buddha himself was not a Buddhist. That's a label that your mind needs to get rid of. Because when you hear people talking fondly about Buddhist, you'll be happy. But when somebody says something degrading and disparaging, you'll feel frustrated or agitated or annoyed because your mind's thinking they're talking about me. So there's a way to shed all of this and get to the point where you do what's called realized non-self, that you realize that this body is not you and this mind is not you. So the Buddha guides you in how to get rid of this pollution out of the mind, because as long as you're clinging to it, you can't experience the permanent peace and permanent joy. So you need to uproot this out of the mind. And there's certain tools and techniques that the Buddha uses to be able to help you accomplish that. Then there's something called doubt. What doubt is where you have doubt about the teachings of the Buddha and whether they are able to help you attain enlightenment. And when someone first comes to the path to enlightenment, they will typically have doubt. This is very normal. But the way you get rid of your doubt about his teachings and their ability of them to attain enlightenment is you investigate the teachings, you examine them. You don't do this through blind belief or faith. There's no belief in the teachings of the Buddha. You're not believing a bunch of things and then hoping something good happens when you die. Instead, you're learning, examining, and investigating his teachings. And then you're reflecting to independently verify if they're true or false. And then you're practicing his teachings, integrating them into your day-to-day life, experiencing more and more transformation. And you'll see the peacefulness of your mind gradually increasing. The joy is gradually increasing. Your relationships are really improving. And you'll get to a point where you have no doubt that these teachings are leading to your enlightenment. You're not going to be enlightened at that point, but your mind will make significant progress on the path. And you'll know that it's these teachings that are doing that for you. So someone might have doubt about the Buddha and whether he actually existed or not. Someone could have doubt about his teachings and their ability to attain enlightenment. They could have doubt about the community that they're part of, because you're going to need to be part of a community to learn and grow and develop in the path. You might have doubt about your teacher and that person's ability to help you get to enlightenment. And you might even have doubt about your own ability to get to enlightenment. So as you're gradually developing your mind and you're seeing progress to the condition of your mind, you'll eventually get to a point where you don't have doubt in these things any longer, because you're experiencing the improvement to the condition of your mind in your life. So this doubt is eliminated through investigation of the teachings. You can actually harness this doubt and turn it into a positive. If you have doubt about these teachings, okay, that's where you're at. That's where most people are when they first start on the path, because you don't even know the teachings of the Buddha. How can you have confidence that these teachings actually lead to enlightenment if you don't even know what his teachings are? Because ultimately that's what you'll get to, is where you have confidence in the teachings of the Buddha. But if you currently have doubt about these teachings, then just admit that to yourself. Yeah, I have doubt about the teachings. I don't know if they lead to enlightenment or not. I don't think that way, but a brand new student can easily think that way. And what you do is you harness this doubt. You turn it into an inquisitive mind. You tell yourself, yeah, I don't know if these teachings lead to enlightenment or not, but you know what? I'm going to find out. I'm going to investigate them. I'm going to roll up the sleeves. I'm going to sink my teeth into it. I'm going to investigate these things and see if they actually lead to enlightenment or not. And through that investigation and examination, you'll see the truth. Because what the Buddha does is he never tells you just believe me. He says just the opposite. He says, come, investigate my teachings, examine them. Because if you examine the teachings and you investigate them close enough, you'll see that they lead to enlightenment. So the way that you get rid of this doubt is through investigation. And you can harness this and turn the mind into an inquisitive mind. And that'll motivate you towards investigation, examination of the teachings. Then there's something called wrong behavior and observances. There's two sides of this. Wrong behavior is basically there's certain moral conduct that each unenlightened being is doing that is harmful. And as long as you keep putting out that harmful moral conduct, that harm is going to come back to you. So you need to improve your moral conduct to the point where you're making wise decisions about the way you interact with other people. This is like your intentions, your speech, your actions, your livelihood, things like this. And the Buddha teaches you how to do that in the Eightfold Path. That's what we're going to study tomorrow. And he shares with you through helping you to see the natural law that if you improve your moral conduct, it's going to improve the results that you're experiencing. So if you could think about like a pipe that has oil running through it. If this pipe busted and it was spewing oil all over the world, Well, the first thing you would be interested in doing is shutting down that pipe so that you don't keep spewing oil all over the world. Well, it's the same thing that if you have this unwise moral conduct and you're putting out all this harmful moral conduct, then you're spewing oil all over the world, and you would like to shut that down. And that's what the Buddha teaches you in the Eightfold Path. So when you improve your moral conduct to the level of what's in the Eightfold Path, you will have extinguished this wrong behavior. And now, because you're not causing harm to others, you're going to see less and less harm coming back to you because you're not causing harm through your moral conduct. Then the Buddha teaches to eliminate what's called wrong observances. What wrong observances is to think that rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, things like this is going to lead to improvement in your life, an improvement on the path to enlightenment, and actually maybe even getting you to enlightenment. The Buddha never taught any rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, prayer, things like this. If you've seen these things attributed to the teachings of the Buddha, even if it was at a temple, even if it was by an ordained practitioner, this person has grossly misunderstood the teachings of the Buddha, because there aren't any rites, rituals, ceremonies, or worship in the teachings of the Buddha, because those things don't lead to wisdom. The Buddha is teaching you and guiding you to cultivate the mind and get to wisdom. He's teaching you to uproot these pollutions out of the mind. And there's no amount of water that I can sprinkle on you that's going to cultivate wisdom. There's no amount of strings that I could tie on your wrist that's going to cultivate wisdom. None of those things, whether you're putting a wafer on your tongue or burning incense or any of these other kinds of things, it's not going to lead to wisdom. So the Buddha teaches you to get to a point where you can understand that the primary problem that you're experiencing is a lack of wisdom, this unknowing of true reality. And the cultivation of wisdom is what's going to lead to your enlightenment. And there's no amount of rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship that's going to do that. Now, whether somebody chooses to do those things or not, that's a decision for them to make. But to get rid of this fetter, you need to at least know in your mind that these things don't lead to enlightenment. So maybe you're going out with your family to a social event. Maybe they're going to the church or the synagogue or the mosque or the temple or something like this, and you like to go along with your family because it's a family event. Okay, go with your family if that's what you'd like to do. But when they're doing those rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship, your mind's going to know that these things don't lead to enlightenment, and you'll be completely content and peaceful whether you do those things or not. But your mind needs to be able to understand that these things don't lead to cultivation of wisdom and they don't lead to enlightenment. Then there's what's called sensual desire. This is where the mind is longing, yearning through the sense bases, wanting permanently agreeable contact. What the sense bases are the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the body, and then the mind itself. The mind is craving permanently agreeable contact. And because of its sensual desire, when it gets agreeable contact, it will get pleasant feelings like happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria. But when it is experiencing disagreeable contact through these sense bases, it will experience painful feelings like anger, sadness, frustration, and others. So for example, let's say the ears. Let's say we're at a stoplight and now a car pulls up next to us with a certain type of music on it. And you're like, whoa, that's my jam. All right, let's go. You're having this agreeable sound coming through the ear, and now the mind really craves that. It has sensual desire. It finds that to be pleasurable, and now you're dancing in your seat, having a really great time. You're so excited. But then you pull up to another traffic light, and somebody else pulls up with a different type of music. And this music is not something you typically listen to. And now the mind will get frustrated or agitated or annoyed because it's hearing a sound that it considers to be disagreeable. But it's not the music that's causing that. And it's not the person who's playing the music. What's causing those painful feelings is the mind's sensual desire, that it's longing, yearning for permanently agreeable contact. And you live in an impermanent world, you can't have permanently agreeable contact. So as long as the mind has this sensual desire, you'll have what's called agreeable and disagreeable contact, or favoring and opposing. Same thing can happen with like the nose. You could be walking down the street and you could smell an odor coming out of a flower shop. And you're like, oh my goodness, that's so amazing. That's such a great smell. But then you walk a few more steps and you smell the sewer. You get a whiff of the sewer. And now the mind's repulsed by it. It's like, that's horrible. Where we can just understand and we can train the mind. Impermanence. Hey, this is a beautiful smell. This is a wonderful smell. Wow, that's really great. And now when you walk and you smell the sewer, that's the sewer. Let me keep walking, right? You don't have to be angry and frustrated just because of this odor. But because of sensual desire, that's what the mind's going to do. It's going to have these pleasant feelings and painful feelings based on contact through the sense bases. And then when the mind's not getting what it wants through its sensual desire, that's when the ill will arise. This is the anger, the bitterness, the harshness, the hostility, because the mind perceives the problem to be external. So it thinks that the problem is the person playing the music. So you might roll down your window and yell and holler at that person to turn off their music, because the mind thinks if I can stop this person from playing the music, then I'll be happy. But that doesn't cause the happiness. It's because of the sensual desire. You got to get rid of that sensual desire, understanding that the world is impermanent. So when the mind's ill will is arising, it can be bitter and harsh and hostile with people. You might push people away out of your life, or you might kind of yell and holler and scream at them through your intention, speech, and actions, or you might put your expectations on them and try to control them and force them to do things your way. And this is the mind trying to get its sensual desire fulfilled. The mind thinks if I can just get things my way, everything will be perfect. So that's why it's pushing people away, being bitter, harsh, and hostile, trying to fear that person into doing things your way, or putting expectations on people and trying to control them to do things your way. So as long as this is in the mind, then you can't live harmoniously with all beings. So there's ways to uproot all of these out of the mind. This is the 5 lower fetters. Do you have any questions on this? Okay. I don't see any questions online either from anybody. So, okay. So now let's go to the higher fetters. I'm going to talk about these two together because they're very similar. What this is desire for form and desire for formless. This is where an individual will have a craving or desire to exist in the form realms, which are the animal realm and the human realm, or they will have a desire for the formless realms. They'll have a desire to exist in hell, the afflicted spirit realm, or the heavenly realm. Now, it's pretty rare that somebody is interested in existing in hell, but there are people who have that craving. More likely than not, people will have a craving to exist in heaven because they think that that's a permanent existence, and they think that that's the way to live life, is do a bunch of good things now, and then you're going to get this wonderful life after this. And this isn't actually true. That realm is not permanent. We can see the world around us is impermanent. So this realm of heaven is not permanent either. It's not a permanent existence. But if you have desire to exist in any of these realms, the mind is still holding on. It's still longing, yearning for something else. So sometimes in the human realm, someone might have a longing, yearning to be a bird, for example. Wow, it'd be really awesome to be a bird. I can fly around and I can look at things and I can see things. This would be really great. So that means they're not content in the present moment, in their current existence. They're longing, yearning for something else, and they can't be content and peaceful in the present moment. So in order to get to the point where your mind's completely peaceful and joyful, you need to be completely peaceful and joyful in the present moment. If you're longing, yearning for what comes next after this, then you're not content in the present moment. So the mind needs to get to a point where it's not longing, yearning for these things. Then there's something called conceit. This is where the mind has arrogance and pride. It's measuring and comparing, thinking of yourself as being above people or below people. And now the mind is going to talk to certain people that you feel are below you in one way, and then the people that you think are above you, you'll talk to them in a different way. And the mind will be shaken up during this period of time. So maybe when somebody goes in to see their boss, they'll think their boss is above them, and their minds will be all shaken up. And now they can't perform so well in their professional career because their mind's all shaken up. Or maybe a certain famous celebrity or politician, their mind's all shaken up around that person. Or maybe they look at people as being below them. Maybe when you go into a social situation like a party or something like this, people might be measuring and comparing each other. It's kind of like you walk in and it's like, so what do you do? Oh, I'm a lawyer. I do this and I do that. Really? Well, I'm a doctor. Right? And like everybody's measuring and comparing themselves about what they do. Where this is coming from is our animal existences. As an animal, we needed to have conceit. We wouldn't have been able to survive without it. Because when we were a pack of wolves, we needed to know who's the alpha male and who's the alpha female, because they're teaching us how to hunt and be better wolves, making our pack stronger. When we were a herd of elephants, we needed to know who's the matriarch of our herd, because if we didn't know that, we would have just been roaming and wandering in the forest. We wouldn't have been able to survive. But this matriarch of the herd, she's showing us where the food is, where the watering holes are, where the migration paths are. She's showing us how to live life as an elephant. So we needed to know who was above us. But as a human being, we don't need this. So we come into this human world and we accumulate more and more of this conceit, measuring and comparing, putting people above us or putting people below us. And now it hinders you from being able to experience wonderful relationships, because in situations, you're constantly trying to figure out how to talk to one person versus talk to another person. Your mind's almost short-circuiting, trying to figure out, do I need to talk down to this person or do I need to talk up to this person? What am I supposed to be doing here? But what you would like to do is get to the point where the mind is humbled and you can just see everybody as being equal, and you can just treat everybody equally. If you see a person out on the street sweeping the streets, good morning, ma'am. Good morning, sir. How are you? Right? You can say hello and be respectful to them. You see the king of Thailand walking down the street or the queen of Thailand walking down the street. Hello, sir. Hello, ma'am. How are you? Good morning. Right? Just treat everybody the same. And now your mind is at ease because you don't have to constantly figure out who's above you and who's below you. So this conceit needs to be eliminated. This is part of what we call the ego, where the word ego didn't exist during the lifetime of the Buddha. So he talks about what we refer to as the ego, as personal existence view, in conceit. This is what we're referring to as the ego. But it's actually best to think of it as two separate things, because there's different symptoms and there's different solutions for each one of these things. But whenever you hear people talk about ego, that's what we're actually talking about, is these two fetters, these two pollutions. So you can work on getting rid of this very early, because it takes a long time to work the ego out of the mind. Then there's something called restlessness. Restlessness is where the mind has this confusion, this distraction, this overactivity in the mind. If you've ever been sitting somewhere and you just kind of like tapped your knee, or you bobbed your knee, or you're tapping your finger, or you have a pencil and you just constantly are tapping it, this is the overactivity in the mind, where it's obsessively thinking about things over and over and over and over again. You can get rid of this. This is a pollution of mind that's going to hinder you from experiencing peace and joy. So there's teachings to help you eliminate that. Then the fetter of all fetters, oftentimes people refer to it as ignorance, but the way that I like to talk about it is the unknowing of true reality, the misunderstanding, the confusion of the mind, the lack of wisdom, because the word ignorance is a derogatory word, and we're translating the words of the Buddha into English. And oftentimes people are using this word ignorance, but this is a derogatory, diminishing word. An enlightened being would never refer to somebody as ignorant or stupid or foolish. So the Buddha didn't use this word ignorance, but I use it because other teachers use it, and you can understand if you ever study with someone else. But a better way to think of this is the unknowing of true reality, the lack of wisdom, the confusion, the misunderstanding that the mind has, the misperceptions of true reality. The mind in the unenlightened state just doesn't understand what it doesn't understand. For example, we will walk around the world thinking and believing that other people are causing you to be angry. That's what the mind thinks in the unenlightened state. It firmly believes that other people are causing you to be angry and frustrated. But when you penetrate into the Four Noble Truths, you can see the truth for yourself, that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings. But with the lack of wisdom, with the ignorance, the unknowing of true reality, the mind will walk around thinking that it's other people that are causing these feelings. So as long as the mind has any of these other fetters, there's still ignorance in the mind. There's still this lack of wisdom. And the way that you get rid of this is not just through intellectual understanding. If you understand something intellectually, you haven't eliminated your ignorance yet. You need to practice it. It's through your practice that the ignorance gets fully eliminated. So for example, when we were growing up as children, we might have understood intellectually that drugs and alcohol are unwise. Our parents taught us that. Our grandparents, other people, they taught us that using drugs and alcohol is unwise. But we still did it maybe, right? That's because of our ignorance, our unknowing of true reality. We intellectually understood, but we didn't have wisdom yet, where we based our decisions in this wisdom, not realizing that putting this poison into the body is going to pollute the body and it's going to pollute the mind. So we still made unwise decisions, even though intellectually we understood something. So you need to get to the point where you're practicing the teachings, that you not only intellectually understand them, you reflect on them to independently verify them, but you're practicing the teachings. And that's where your ignorance gets eliminated. So you need things like the 3 universal truths, the 4 noble truths, the Eightfold Path, the 5 precepts, all these different teachings, the natural law of karma. These are all things that you need to awaken to. When we talk about awakening, it means to cultivate wisdom. That's what you're doing. You're not believing the teachings. And that's how you get rid of this ignorance, is through the cultivation of wisdom. Okay, so any questions on the higher fetters? No? Okay, so now that we understand the fetters, at least to an introductory point, we can talk about the 4 stages of enlightenment. Because as you're eliminating the fetters, your mind's going to move through the 4 stages of enlightenment. There's stream enter, once returner, non-returner, and arahant. This is the way the Buddha would refer to them during his lifetime. It was referred to as a stream enter, which today we might just call the first stage of enlightenment. It was referred to as a stream enter because just like a log enters the stream, and it will eventually get to the ocean. Once you get to the first stage of enlightenment, you're going to get to enlightenment. It's only a matter of time. Either in this life or some future life, you will get to enlightenment. So that's why he referred to it as a stream enter. He referred to it as a once returner because if you die in this stage of enlightenment, you're going to come back into this human world one more time and you'll get to enlightenment in that existence. He referred to it as a non-returner because if you die in that stage of enlightenment, you're going to be reborn into the heavenly realm and you will attain enlightenment there. You won't come back to the human realm. And then this term arahant, this was used to describe someone who's completely purified their mind. If you've eliminated all the 10 fetters, your mind is now completely purified. This is an arahant. So we would refer to this person as an enlightened being, that they've completely purified their mind. And then there's something called a Buddha, which I'll explain to you what that is. Okay. So as you're eliminating the first 3 fetters and you've actually completely eliminated them from the mind will be in the first stage of enlightenment. And in this stage of enlightenment, you'll see a significant decrease in your discontentedness. Whatever your discontentedness was when you were off the path to enlightenment to when you get to this first stage of enlightenment, it's just a mere fraction of what it once was. You still get discontent in this first stage of enlightenment, but it's a mere fraction of what it once was. It's really shrunk your discontentedness significantly. And that's through eliminating these first 3 pollutions. Then the first 3 pollutions are already eliminated, but to get to this second stage of enlightenment, you will have thinned out number 4 and 5, where sensual desire and ill will is gradually decreasing. It's still in the mind, but it's thinned out. So sometimes what people notice when this is starting to thin out is they're just not as interested in sex anymore. Like this is a very strong sensual desire that the mind has, that when you start seeing that your sexual cravings start to diminish, this is actually your mind completely starting to move away from this sensual desire or starting to diminish. And because your sensual desire is diminishing, your ill will is diminishing too. Because that anger and the ill will is arising because the mind's not getting what it wants. Right? By the time you get to the 3rd stage of enlightenment, all 5 of these fetters will be eliminated by that point. And each one of these stages, your discontentedness is diminishing and diminishing and diminishing. By the time you get to this 3rd stage, you'll be experiencing discontentedness like once every 2 months, once every 3 months. It's very infrequent and it's very insignificant when it occurs. It's almost like 30 seconds, maybe a minute at most. And your mind can immediately stamp it out because your mind's not yet enlightened yet. So sometimes when people are in this 3rd stage of enlightenment, they can become complacent because you're not experiencing much discontentedness at this point. But you need to stay diligent and dedicated in this stage of enlightenment because the mind's not enlightened yet. Then when you eliminate all the 10 fetters, that's where the mind's actually enlightened. And you can see this for yourself. That's one of the things that's unique about the teachings of the Buddha is, again, it's not about believe, believe, believe and hope something good happens when you die. You can see your mind gradually moving towards this more peaceful and joyful mental state. And by the time you get to this point where the mind's completely purified, you'll see that it's 1 year, 2 years, 3 years that your mind is experiencing complete peace and complete joy. You're not experiencing any discontent feelings whatsoever because the mind is completely purified of these 10 fetters. Okay? So what a Buddha is a Buddha is an individual who's actually gotten to enlightenment. They've completely purified their mind of the 10 fetters, but they've done it in a unique way. This isn't a stage of enlightenment. This is a unique type of individual, and they're very rare in the world. An individual who's a Buddha, they've gotten to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. That's one of the first criteria of what makes a Buddha, is that they don't need teachers and guides to help them to get to enlightenment. Then, once they get to enlightenment, they share their teachings that they've discovered on their own with countless people. And now, over the course of their life, countless people get to enlightenment during that person's lifetime. Then the third criteria is that they preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people will get to enlightenment after their death. So these are the three main criteria of what makes a Buddha, is that they get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. They then dedicate the rest of their life to sharing their independently discovered teachings with countless people, and countless people will get to enlightenment during that person's lifetime. Then they will preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people will get to enlightenment after their death. So this is very rare to exist in the world. Some places today, they will tell you that everybody is a Buddha. But the Buddha never taught this. He never explained that. That is people, what they're misunderstanding today. But during the lifetime of the Buddha, he explained how rare it is for a Buddha to exist in the world. And that's because all three of these criteria don't exist in the mind of an individual very often. So the last Buddha that the world is currently aware of existed over 2,500 years ago. And there hasn't been a Buddha since then that the world's currently aware of. The thing that allows an individual like a Buddha to get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides is this fourth criteria, where they have a profound memory, well beyond anything of an average human being. An average human being has a certain limited capacity in their mind, kind of like a hard drive. They might have 500 gigabytes or 1 terabyte of hard drive space. And when they get to the capacity, they need to delete old files in order to store new files. And this is why, like in the last 5 years or so, you pretty much remember all the things that you've been involved in. But if you think back to your childhood, you just have spotty memories because you've had to delete those files in order to store these new files, right? An individual who's going to become a Buddha, they don't have that limited capacity. They have an unlimited capacity where they can accumulate wisdom over multiple lifetimes. They will remember countless details about their current life and their previous lives as well, and they bring forth all that wisdom into their last life to be able to train their mind to get to enlightenment. That's how they actually do it, by themselves. So you can see that this is a very unique quality that doesn't exist very frequently. An individual who's a Buddha can quickly determine the condition of someone else's mind and then help that individual with teachings to be able to get to enlightenment, because they can observe the fetters in somebody else's mind, because they've worked on those fetters so deeply within their own mind to get rid of them that they can see the fetters in other people's minds as well. And now they'll be able to help that person to be able to then make their way to enlightenment through sharing teachings. But they only do this with people that are actually students. They don't just talk to random people and give this person teachings. They're going to only share teachings with people who have actually chosen to be a student of theirs. Then the last thing that an individual who a Buddha is going to practice is they're going to be a living, breathing, walking example of their teachings. Whatever they teach, they also practice those same things as well. So they're a living, breathing, walking example of their teachings because they understand that their students are learning just as much through their spoken words as they are through their actions, right? That a Buddha is also teaching through their actions as well. So whatever they teach through their spoken words, they're going to be practicing those same things as well, being a living, breathing, walking example of their teachings. So this is what a Buddha is. And we refer to this person as a fully, perfectly enlightened one, right? A fully, perfectly enlightened one, because what they know by the time they get to enlightenment is the path to enlightenment, right? And the average person who's learned from another teacher to get to enlightenment, they might actually be enlightened, but maybe only 80 or 90% of the things that they understand actually led to their enlightenment. They still have some extra baggage around because they're just maybe practicing those things out of respect for their teacher. But a Buddha, not having any teachers, they don't do that. So if they try a certain meditation and it works to improve the condition of their mind, they know that that's the path to enlightenment. But if they try a certain meditation and they see it doesn't work to get to enlightenment, they discard it and they throw it away because they know it's not the path to enlightenment. So by the time a Buddha gets to enlightenment, they understand the path very clearly. And now they spend the rest of their life illuminating the path and making it very clear for people of how to actually get to enlightenment through sharing the teachings that it takes to be able to get to enlightenment. So now they dedicate their life to doing that and preserving the teachings so that afterwards more and more people can get to enlightenment. So this is what a Buddha is. We refer to this person as fully, perfectly enlightened. Okay, any questions on this? No? Okay. All right. Well, now let's just talk a little bit about what enlightenment is not, because this will help you understand what enlightenment is. If an individual is experiencing conditioned feelings, then you know that your mind is not enlightened. What a conditioned feeling is where the mind is experiencing some feeling based on a condition. A condition is like if it's sunny outside, you'll be happy. But then when it rains, you'll be sad or frustrated. That's a conditioned feeling, that the mind is forming its inner feelings based on impermanent situations. And as long as your mind's doing that, you can't be permanently peaceful because the mind's craving permanence. So if the mind is experiencing conditional happiness, that it can only be happy when these particular situations are occurring, then it can't be permanently happy because those things are not permanent. So an enlightened being is beyond the conditionality of its feelings. They're experiencing unconditioned mental qualities where the mind is always happy, but it's unconditioned. There's no condition that needs to exist in order for the mind to experience that happiness. So if you're experiencing these conditional feelings based on some condition, you are going to experience some feeling, then you know your mind is unenlightened. If the mind has a craving, desire to tell other people that you are enlightened, then you know your mind's not enlightened. So if you're ever somewhere and somebody comes up to you and says, hey, by the way, I'm enlightened. Well, you know right away they're not enlightened because an enlightened being doesn't go around bragging. They're not boastful. They're not arrogant. They're not showing off the fact that they're enlightened. So if an individual has that, that means they still have ego and they can't be enlightened. So you wouldn't go around and brag and tell people that you're enlightened. You're not going to put it on your Facebook profile. You're not going to call up mom and be like, hey, mom, guess what? I'm enlightened. Aren't you so proud of me? Well, if this person's enlightened, why do you need to come around and tell us about it? Like, just go have fun. Go be peaceful. You don't need to come tell us that you're enlightened. If you're so peaceful and you're so joyful, why do you need to come tell us about it? What do you want? Do you want us to bow down to you? Do you want us to admire you? Like, what are you wanting from us? Whereas if you want something from us, your mind's not enlightened yet. So if somebody has a craving to tell other people that they're enlightened, then their mind is not enlightened. So an enlightened being won't tell other people that they're enlightened because they don't have ego, they don't have arrogance and boastfulness and pride in the mind. If you're noticing that the mind is complacent, where there's a lack of motivation, initiative, enthusiasm, or a willingness to do something, then you know the mind is not yet enlightened because the mind can feel dull and lethargic and complacent. If you're noticing that, where it doesn't have this vigor, this vitality, this enthusiasm and ambition, then the mind's not yet enlightened. Because that's typically what the mind will do, is it'll chase, or it'll swing to the other side in the unenlightened state, and it'll be dull and lethargic and lazy and complacent. Where when you come to the middle, your mind is bright and cheerful and uplifted at all times during your day. It doesn't experience this swinging back and forth. So if you're noticing that complacency, then the mind is not yet enlightened. Okay? So this is what enlightenment is, right? And like I mentioned, at the end of a conversation, you can know more about what enlightenment is at the end of a conversation, but you're not going to know everything about it at this point. But now at least you have a better understanding of what enlightenment is so that you can more easily navigate your way to it. And now what I'm going to do is just take a break here. It's only about 11 o'clock. We can do a couple of things. We'll talk after I shut off the live stream. But for all of you guys online, thank you all for joining. We're just going to kind of end our morning session here by thanking all of you guys for joining. If you'd like to learn more, you can see our website at buddhadailywisdom.com. Click on free books and you'll see the first book. That's a great place to get started. You can also see our YouTube channel and other things that we have available for you to learn, like our podcast and our audiobooks, and it's all available at no cost. So whatever you choose to do today, have a very lovely and wonderful rest of your day. We'll see you next time. Sawadee Krap.